The trap didn't close on her schedule. It closed on her identity. Nadia wasn't trapped by the workload. She was trapped by who she'd become inside it. Mosaic wasn't just her job. It was her evidence that she was someone. Have you ever stayed somewhere toxic? Not because you believed it would get better, but because you couldn't imagine who you'd be without it? That's not loyalty. That's identity capture. And the organization counted on it. So she started documenting. Quietly. A private spreadsheet. Dates. Conversations. Promises that were made and broken. Not because she was building a case, because she needed proof that she wasn't losing her mind. Row after row. Meeting after meeting. Each one a tiny betrayal wrapped in corporate language. We value your input. Row 47. Let's revisit that next quarter. Row 62. You're doing great, just be patient. Row 78. Nadia thought she was collecting evidence. What she was really collecting was proof that the system worked exactly as designed. She loved that job. That's why she kept believing the promises. But the scariest part wasn't what was happening in her calendar. It was what her own body had started doing. Nadia developed chronic jaw pain. She was clenching her teeth in her sleep. Her doctor prescribed a mouth guard. Her therapist prescribed boundaries. Mosaic prescribed another town hall about wellness. She started waking up at 4 a.m., not from nightmares, from rehearsals, running through the next day's meetings in her head, preparing counterarguments for attacks that hadn't happened yet. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, rehearsing a conversation that might never happen, just to feel safe enough to fall back asleep? That's not anxiety. That's tactical preparation for a war zone that pretends to be a workplace. And your nervous system knows the difference, even when your mind refuses to. She went to her annual physical. Her blood pressure was elevated. Her cortisol levels were twice the normal range. The doctor asked if she was under unusual stress. She laughed. Just work. And that laugh, that automatic, deflecting laugh, was the most honest thing she said all year, because it told the truth her words were too trained to say. She loved that job. That's why her body started trying to leave before she did. The decision didn't come from anger. That's the part nobody warns you about. You expect some dramatic final straw, a screaming match, a public humiliation, a firing. But Nadia's breaking point was a Wednesday, 11 in the morning, a Zoom call, camera off, on mute. Marcus was presenting the results of a project she had led, her research, her methodology, her months, and he never said her name. Not once. 37 minutes, she counted. Nobody in that call knew who had built what they were looking at. When the call ended, she didn't close her laptop. She sat there. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel angry. She didn't feel injustice. She felt nothing. That absence was the alarm. She loved that job. That's why the numbness felt normal. Because the moment you stop caring about the injustice, it means the system has successfully taught you that you don't matter. If you asked Nadia during this period, she would have told you she was grateful for the opportunity. She would have said Mosaic sharpened her professionally. She would have meant it, and she would have been completely wrong. If you're in a workplace like this right now, you probably don't call it toxic. You call it challenging. You call it just how it is. You call it not that bad. And that vocabulary was installed by the same system that's consuming you. She spoke to a friend that evening, not a coworker, not a mentor from Mosaic, an old university friend named Jules, who had left a similar firm 3 years earlier. Jules didn't give her advice. She asked one question. If this was happening to someone you loved, Would you tell them to stay? Nadia opened her mouth and closed it again. She knew the answer. She had always known. And here's what nobody tells you about that kind of clarity. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like something breaking. Because the moment you admit you need to leave, you also admit you've been lying to yourself about why you stayed. Most people think leaving is the hard part. It isn't. The hard part is the night before. Nadia drafted her resignation letter on a Thursday. The first version was 3 pages, a detailed account of everything that had gone wrong, dates, examples, emotional labor. She rewrote it 11 times. Each version got shorter, not because she was softening it, because she was stripping away the parts that were still asking for permission. The final version was 4 sentences. She wasn't writing it for Marcus anymore. She was writing it for herself. She printed it, folded it, put it in her bag, and then she sat on her bed for 40 minutes, holding the bag, not moving. Because the warm version of Mosaic still flickered. The team lunches, the late-night launches, the Slack messages that said, "We couldn't have done this without you." The human moments that made the abuse tolerable. Walking away meant accepting that those moments didn't erase the damage, and that the people she had trusted were part of the machinery. Have you ever held a resignation letter, or an unsent message, or a suitcase by the door, and felt the weight of what it meant to actually let go of a place that was supposed to be your dream? That's not hesitation. That's grief. You are mourning the version of reality you wanted to believe in. And there's no shortcut through that. And leaving doesn't feel like escaping. It feels like you're the one abandoning something that needed you, because the system taught you that your departure is the betrayal, not theirs. She walked in on a Friday morning, 8:15, before most of the team arrived. She placed the letter on Marcus's desk. He wasn't there yet. She stood in the doorway for 9 seconds, looked at the open plan floor, the standing desks, the motivational posters about belonging. Then she left. She didn't say goodbye, not because she was angry, because she knew that if she started talking, she might stay. One more conversation, one more promise, one more "let's find a solution together," and that door would close again. Her badge stayed on the desk next to the letter. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. And the silence in that hallway was the first silence in 2 years that didn't feel threatening. The first weeks without work aren't a vacation. They're decompression. A diver who's been too deep for too long. If you surface too fast, the blood boils. Nadia slept 12 hours a night. Her body was paying back a debt she didn't know she owed. She didn't check Slack. She didn't open LinkedIn. She sat in her kitchen and stared at the light moving across the counter. And then, week 4, the phantom pain. She caught herself rehearsing a meeting that didn't exist, checking her phone for messages from people who no longer managed her, feeling guilty for going grocery shopping at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, because part of her brain still believed she was supposed to be at her desk. Have you ever left a place that hurt you and then missed it? Not because it was good, but because your nervous system was trained to operate under that specific kind of pressure. And without it, you didn't know what to do with the silence. That's not weakness. That's withdrawal. You're detoxing from a system that used stress as its operating language, and your body doesn't know the war is over yet. Nadia started therapy 3 weeks after leaving, not because she had a breakdown, because standing in a grocery store aisle, choosing between 2 brands of pasta, she thought, what would Marcus say about this choice? That was the moment she understood. It wasn't the job that followed her home. It was the voice, and the voice had become her own. Nadia wasn't damaged because Mosaic was cruel. She was damaged because Mosaic was consistent. It rewired her so quietly that she didn't realize the damage until the noise stopped. 14 months later, Nadia works freelance now. She chooses her clients, she sets her hours. She still flinches on Sunday night phone notifications, but the flinch is getting shorter. She told Jules recently, "I don't miss the job, I miss the person I was before I needed to leave it." And even after they're gone, you still hear it. That tiny voice before every decision. Is this okay? Am I sure? Am I allowed? And the voice doesn't sound like Marcus anymore. It sounds like you. If someone came to your mind while watching this, there's a reason for that. The question isn't whether they need to hear this, it's whether you do. She loved that job. That's why she still wonders. It was right. It's always right. But Nadia had something most people don't: a door, a letter, and exit. Some people are still inside a system that started before they had language for it. When the person extracting you is the one who raised you, there is no resignation letter. There is no desk to leave a badge on. That story is next. She loved that job more than she loved herself. That's how the company knew she wouldn't leave. And for 2 years, they used that. If you've ever stayed somewhere that was slowly erasing you, not because you were trapped, but because leaving felt like admitting you weren't strong enough, you need to hear this. She's been free for 14 months now. She still flinches when her phone buzzes on a Sunday night, and even now, she isn't the same person she was before she walked in. This is about what it takes to finally go, and about the voice that follows you after you do. Her name was Nadia, senior UX researcher at a design consultancy in Chicago, the kind of person who could map user pain points in her sleep. Colleagues used to joke that she could read a room faster than any analytics tool. She wasn't naive, she wasn't passive. She was the person who organized team retrospectives and pushed back on unrealistic timelines, the person who said the hard thing when no one else would. Which is exactly the kind of person toxic systems tend to break first, not the quiet ones, the ones who push back. The consultancy was called Mosaic, Glassdoor rating 4.3 stars, free lunches, meditation rooms, quarterly town halls where the CEO talked about psychological safety and radical transparency. Everything about Mosaic looked perfect. For about 11 months. It didn't feel wrong. Not at 6 months. Not at a year. Not even after she started crying in her car before walking through the door. The first cracks weren't dramatic. They were procedural. Nadia's direct reports started getting reassigned. Not all at once. One here, one there. Always with a reasonable explanation. Resourcing. Client needs. Restructuring. She lost 3 people in 4 months. Nobody replaced them. Her workload doubled. Her title stayed the same. Have you ever watched your job description quietly expand without anyone adjusting your compensation, your support, or your title? And when you finally said something, they looked at you like you were the problem. That's not a growth opportunity. That's a quiet overwork system. And you weren't promoted, you were consumed. She brought it up once, in a one-on-one with her director, Marcus. She laid out the numbers, the hours, the client load, the gap between her responsibilities and her team size. Marcus listened, nodded, took a sip of his coffee. He had this habit, tilting his head slightly to the left whenever he was about to say something that sounded kind, but meant no. I hear you, Nadia, but honestly, this is what leadership looks like at this level. The people who thrive here, they figure it out. She left that meeting feeling like she had failed a test she didn't know she was taking. She didn't argue. She didn't escalate. She adjusted, because that's what good employees do. And Marcus knew that about her.